Andrew's out sick this week, so we've replaced him with somebody more handsome, more, important.
Oh, wow.
All the compliments.
I'm sorry, Andrew. I don't know what they're saying.
John Athayde, welcome to the podcast. I'm pretty sure we talked about coming on a long time ago and just it never happened. So here we are, but know that I wanted to have you on like years ago.
A long-time listener, first-time caller, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah. It's good to finally have you on. I don't even know. Let's start with your background. You've been around the community for a long time. So I'm sure people who aren't familiar would love to hear, your background and all of that, how you got into Rails and whatnot.
Yeah, so my name is John Athayde. I own a branding and user experience consultancy called Meticulous, and I've been running that intermittently since 1997. It's one of the things we started in college, and it's been full-time for parts of that. And for the last 3, now coming on 4 years, it's been the full-time playground. And so I did start in Rails with my business partner, Justin Hankins, back in the day. He had sent over that original David video of your, this is, I'm working as a creative director, doing e-commerce stuff. And we're building PHP sites, and he sends us over. He's like, check this out. And so watch the video, enjoy the energy. And we were starting to play with the zip file. This is like pre 1.0. And, I joined into the IRC channels of Ruby on Rails. And that's where I met so many people, including Amy Hoy and a whole bunch of other people in that world, and got pulled into another channel called The Caboose, which you can find an image of a whole bunch of us at the first RailsConf hanging out there, which is kind of hilarious to look at all the people that are in that picture. But yeah, so we shipped our first CMS in Ruby on Rails right as 1.0 was going live, and been dabbling in it ever since, and learned basically real programming. I'll put that in, because I dabbled in HyperCard and things of that nature when I was much younger. But like outside of, PHP, like actually starting to learn about model view controller, getting into all the realities of that kind of world, and starting to read Gang of Four, things of that all happened because of Ruby. And so worked with Amy Hoy for a year and a half. We did a bunch of work with Bear Stearns, and when Zed Shah was up there. Then Guggenheim Securities, that whole team kind of ported after the whole crazy crash, and also with Gary Vee and a bunch of other people in that realm. And then I got hired into InfoEther, which was a Ruby consultancy in Northern Virginia. And that was Rich Kilmer, Chad Fowler, Bruce Williams, a bunch of those guys. So kind of was the design guy for this Ruby shop. Definitely getting to basically be like, hey, how do I do this? And I remember Chad literally teaching me, because I was like, yeah, I'm going to rebuild my blog in Rails. And he was like, all sorts of like, well, why don't you do it this way? What about this? And in hindsight, being like, I'm getting code reviewed by Chad Fowler is like, now I'm just like, wow, that was super special. But at the time, I'm like, hey, Chad's my coworker. What's up, guys? Those guys, they were heavily involved in the early Ruby Gems implementation. They introduced Ruby into DARPA, of all things, back in the day. And so really comes some cutting edge craziness, and it was a lot of fun and a consulting thing. And then we got acquired by Living Social at Acquihire. So we were up to 15 by the time that happened. I was in number 7-ish in the group. We all kind of got spread out into the team. We doubled the size of the team overnight, which is always a fun culture shock in an engineering org. So I ended up being the designer of the design team there at the time, very talented, but they were very don't touch code. And that was the younger, more cocky me that was an anathema. I was like, no, you have to be in the code. So I ended up sitting in engineering as a front-end developer. And then I kind of invented the internal tools design role by just redesigning stuff. And I built that out and did that, kind of created prototypical design systems, and went out from there and just started doing other things in logistics and whatnot. But yeah, no, I mean, you've probably seen some of my talks. I've done talks at various Rails comps. How to make software like Pixar makes movies is one that gets a lot of pickup. Some of the older ones were the designers and developers working better together, which is how I ended up working with Procore for 18 months, which was pretty awesome. That was a lot of fun back in a decade ago now. It doesn't feel that long ago, but the gray in my beard would tell you it was that long ago. Before that, I actually went to architecture school. So I'm a dabbler in the sense of I taught myself design in high school and, learned print and yearbook. And then all these things just kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Grab that, learn that, pull that from here, learn some typography stuff from this book. So there's a lot of just inhaling, and the benefit of hitting the web at the time we did. I went to college in fall of 95, and it's like, hey, this is Hot Dog Pro, and this is Netscape 1, and here's the VAX system, and go ahead and you can make a website. Oh, wow, cool. And just kind of grew up with it. if I started today, I don't know if I'd be able to do any of this stuff, but it just happened to be, I had a nice slow burn into it. But most of the things I was doing have always been in kind of cross between design and engineering and dabbling a little bit in product.
Wild tour of, various things over the years. Those were all like really amazing. Haven't heard the name Living Social in a long time. And I was like, that's fascinating. It looks like Living Social acquired InfoEther in 2011. And they had 2 acquisitions in 2010, or like 5 in 2011.
We were like, so they were 15, wild. We were 15. And so it was just like doubling the team overnight, right? Ooh. And yeah, right. So, and I mean, everyone, they've got their culture, they've got their hierarchy. We have our culture and our hierarchy, and it's just different personalities. And so like, I've always loved working with Rich Kilmer. He has a very strong idea of what we're going to do. Like, he has a good vision, and he's, very like, we're going to go do that. And sometimes other people would not be able to keep up with, he was like, I'm gone. And they were like, wait, we need to talk about that more. And he's like, no, we're coding. Come on, keep up. So he ended up running R&D there because it was just like, they were just going so fast. It was like him, Anthony Eden. I mean, it ended up being like Chad and Rich and a bunch of the team, Patrick Joyce and a bunch of those guys, just basically starting to say, who do we want to work with? And they just kind of got a budget. They could just go and extend offers. And so it really became this incredible team of collaborators, and everybody was just a player. It was just amazing to work. Like David Brian Copeland was doing a whole bunch of stuff on payments, and you had a whole bunch of people working over on merchant. And I was mostly an internal. So like with Chris Flipsy and a bunch of these guys were just like, David Bach was in there. And I mean, it's just like insane to kind of think of this like collection that happened of engineering talent. And it's also kind of a bummer to see, how from the business side, we did so much stuff, and then it gets just kind of absorbed into Groupon, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I see on the Wikipedia page too, it shows like 2012's revenue was $500 million. And then 3 years later, it was a tenth, 57 million. That's crazy though. That was such a wild time. And I was like still in college or whatever for those things are fresh out. That reminded me of like the early GitHub days, seeing the blog posts of like, we hired this person and that person, and how like crazy cool the talent was that you could see them just small team, but hiring just the best of the best because they had massive budgets for it and all that. And I guess it's kind of happening the same in the AI world now too, is like you see a lot of that going on. One thing you didn't mention was the Rails view, which I think is worth talking about.
Bruce Williams and I co-authored that for Pragmatic Programmers, which was an amazing experience. And I mean, candidly, being part of the community is one thing, but then, putting a book out, put your name on the map in a different way, right? So people are like, oh, you're that guy. And Bruce and I did the tour. So I went up and down because he's out in West Coast, right? So I'm here in Virginia, he's in Portland. And so I did a bunch of the user groups from, I think I went up to New York City, down into North Carolina, and met a whole lot of people in a way that you really can't at a bigger conference, where you can go and hang out with 20 people and really talk deeply about a concept and an issue. And so we did a tour on that in 2013 and 14. We did, I think it was Baltimore. We did a big workshop. We did Scott RubyConf and a whole bunch of other ones that were a lot of fun. Just to, talking about the junk drawer was kind of our talk title. Like the Rails view had really become a junk drawer at that point, where it was like, hey, let's just slam everything in there. This is even before we had Webpacker and all that kind of stuff. So, your build pipeline, it was fragile as all get out. And you just kind of said a prayer as you made a commit and hoped that it didn't come back to you. Yeah, this broke everything. But
the description on the O'Reilly page about the book coming out was, you'll learn how to build solid, sustainable layouts and popular interfaces with semantic HTML5 and CSS3. Master the asset pipeline introduced in Rails 3.1 as you use Sass and CoffeeScript.
Yeah.
And that was before Webpacker, thank goodness. Because I remember that stuff fondly. CoffeeScript was pretty neat because it felt a lot like Ruby.
Right.
The big downside was like, it's not Ruby. So it's
David's like, no.
It's still the quirks of like JavaScript at the end of the day. And then, the debugging is the worst part. We're like, you get a JavaScript error, but how do you trace it back to the CoffeeScript that generated that?
No mapping, no nothing, right?
It was rough back then. And like these days, it's a lot better for almost all tools. And like I saw Marco's doing the keynote down at Tropical on Rails.
Incredible. When I first saw the show and tell at RailsConf, the last one in Philly, I was just like jaw at the floor. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. This is so cool. I put that on all my apps almost immediately just to be like, oh, this is so helpful. Just being able to dig in and find out. Like, I mean, just the missing div, like, Rails was just rendering it and being like, don't worry, I got it.
And your browser's like, cool, that's fine. Yeah. Like, we see this all the time. We'll close it wherever it makes sense.
But I was also a little mortified. I was like, oh no, man, I can't do that. I can't ship code like that.
Yeah. It's come such a long ways since 2012 or whatever, when the book came out.
Are you tired of babysitting your job queues? Let us do it for you. JudoScale monitors and autoscales your job queues so you can stop babysitting and get back to coding. We support Sidekick, SolidQ, GoodJob, and just about every other job backend in Rubyland. And of course, we autoscale your web services too. JudoScale scales up your apps faster than any other autoscaler, so request timeouts and backed up job queues are mitigated before they become a problem. JudoScale has a free plan you can use forever, so there's literally no risk, whether you're on Heroku, AWS, Render, or any other cloud platform. Visit judoscale.com and get your job queues under control.
I remember in the early days when I was learning Rails, watching some talks from, I don't remember, Ryan Singer, I think, which you remind me of, because it was like, here's a designer that actually does their work in HTML and CSS. Like, this is a very different type of designer than I've ever met. They're always in Photoshop or whatever, and like, oh, we don't touch the code. And then the second you implement it, you're like, what do we do with this title that is in production that's way longer than any of the ones in it's either got to be truncated with an ellipse or like wrapped. This one's like 5 lines tall. Like, what do we do with that? Right. And, the design from just the happy path in Figma or Photoshop or whatever just never really hits the real world issues like that, where it's like, what if we have edge cases? Every little thing here is going to have an edge case. The blog post photos, what if they're a square and not a rectangle? And like, what if we can't crop them properly? What do you do? And I think that's something that I realized is like, that kind of person working in design is the one that I want to work with, because they think about like all of the in-between stuff that matters, the sort of like edge cases that are impossible to notice in Photoshop. But when you're thinking about it as half engineer, half designer, you're always noticing those things, and you can address them probably before it even comes up half the time. So I'm just curious, is that rare? Like, it seems rare of a skill set to me.
I would say it's more rare than it should be. Let me build out around that, because coming from architecture, I am not a mason. I am not a concrete expert. I am not a drywall installer. I'm not an electrician. However, part of architecture education is you have to know how all that stuff works. You have to know how all that stuff goes together. I could get a book and understand, okay, well, that wire's got to run from here to here. Now, am I going to do the twist on it? I don't know, we do a little, sign of the cross, say a prayer, hope I don't shock myself, but I at least have the theory of how this is supposed to go together. And I think the problem is so many designers were and still are. And I think, AI is changing this mentality, because you can't anymore, right? You have to be in the code now. But I think so many designers were like, oh, no, I don't touch that. I don't deal with that. And the problem of that is twofold. One, they design things that were difficult to build, or in some cases impossible to build. Now, CSS and the amazing work that has been done from the CSS working group and a lot of these people that are at the cutting edge, like Leah Veru and some of these experimenters out there doing wild things with CSS, they've driven that forward, right? To like, okay, this is this crazy design concept someone came up with. We probably can build it, and then you have the JavaScript polyfill kind of community that's always like, we're not going to wait for a standard. We're just going to go make something up and hack the browser, which is always exciting to see somebody do something really crazy in that world. But it's now the point where a lot of those things are actually doable, and you don't have to kind of cobble it together. It's like really elegant solutions like CSS clamp, where I can sit there and say, hey, I've got a min and a max, and then it's going to work in between those and some of those kind of things, right? But the designers still, now this is like the sudden, like, how do I use Claude Code? And it's this, I remember typing DNS entries into a 386 box in 1997. And my friend Sam Scruggs teaching me, he's like, yeah, man, you got to figure out how to do this stuff here. We had our first server was a DNS box basically, and had some SQL on it. I got pretty comfortable early on dabbling in that stuff. And so it was just another part of the way I put something online, right? It wasn't this separate piece. And if you look at from a practice mentality, the flows become an issue, right? And this goes both ways. Like, developers have similar issues, but in a different way about flow. So designer is thinking this screen, then this screen, then this screen, and they're missing states and edge cases and weird things that kind of branch off of that sometimes. Developers and Rails, unfortunately, it's gotten much better, but in early days, it was like, well, I've got my CRUD for this, and I've got my CRUD for that, and I've got my CRUD for that. And so if you want to do a whole build out on this really important entry, I've got to go put the entry in piece 1, piece 2, and piece 3 that I then have as selects in piece 4, right? And so you have that really weird flow as opposed to, well, no, just like, can I do a find or create by? Could I do something along those lines? And being able to just call it the thing it is, I think is super important. It's becoming less of a thing now where, you're just kind of telling the AI and it's interpreting those things. But in communicating with other practitioners, especially in that triangle of product development design, it's really important to be able to use the right words. And then also talking to a client, the client doesn't need to know what find or create by is. They don't care if that's a method in Rails. That's irrelevant to them. They want to know that I don't have to go type it in over here and then come back and type it in again.
Yeah.
So I don't have to go back out to come back to where I was mentally. Like, what's my mental flow? So both of those are problematic. And I think once you start thinking about how software is built, it becomes more self-evident, perhaps, that of how you should approach that problem from a visual perspective, from a flow perspective, and also from a programmatic perspective.
Yeah, there's so much of that that's like with the designers and the edge cases, like Photoshop doesn't make it easy for you to realize that I'm going to run into an issue when this title is super long.
Right.
And vice versa, like Rails and Forms and CRUD doesn't make it easy when you're like, I have a select, but the browser doesn't give me a good way to like make it a combo box to type in the new record and then just create a placeholder and we can fill out the details later, or a modal or something. Like in the past, that's been the limitation of developer sides. They build a clunky thing, but then the designer also makes a clunky thing in a different way because of the limitations of each part. AI is kind of doing a big job at addressing that. So it's kind of like, what if we did the smooth, integrated way of this from the very beginning and we didn't do it the clunky way first? That's going to make things a lot easier going forward, I'm hoping.
For sure. And I mean, it's just in the last year, because I was starting off in, early Cursor and doing that kind of like ChatGPT, or like, here, what do you think about this? And copying the code because I didn't trust it and typing it in myself. And then it's like, and I mean, if you look 12 months later, I'm like dangerously skip permissions on all the things. But it's a different kind of approach, right? Because I was arguing for months with early versions of Cursor and Claude Code of trying to get Tom Select to work. And I'm like, nope, still not doing it. Still not creating the records, still not doing it. And I was just like, I don't know enough JavaScript to understand what was choking. And so, that was a frustration. But now it literally is like, boom, done. Here you go. And it's like, wow, that's magic. Mm-hmm. But also now I can actually move at the speed of thought in implementation. And people are like, oh, this is dead, that is dead, whatever. I think that's a load of bull. All these tools are tools that help us solve problems as opposed to create deliverables. So sometimes I need to go into Figma because I can't really work it out in the screen, or I can't work it out in my head. But I spend a lot less time mocking everything up than I used to, for sure.
Honeybadger helps you deploy with confidence and be your team's DevOps hero by combining error, uptime, and performance monitoring in one simple platform. It's free to get started, and setup just takes a few minutes. Be the hero your team needs. Suit up at honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io. Have you seen the demo that Adam Wathan just posted of UI.sh?
I saw part of it. I haven't got a chance to watch the whole thing. Steve's hour-long walkthrough I was watching as well. They're both some fascinating ways to do it.
The quick 2-minute demo Adam posted was really great because it was kind of like, I want to add a testimonial section after the hero. And that was basically all he gave it. And it generated a testimonial section. But the cool thing that they did with UISH is it gives you a selector, so you can go see 4 different types of testimonial layouts and then choose whatever you like the best that fits your aesthetic or layout or whatever you're looking for. But it was like, oh, this is cool. Rather than having to like, as not a designer, I want a testimonial section. I don't really know what I'm looking for exactly. Like, I don't have a sense of which style I want to use or whatever. That really gives me a lot of affordances to like play around and figure it out and, make a decision where it wasn't something that I could generally do before. Cause I would just, even if I did give it to AI, it was just going to give me one. And it'd be like, here you go. And you're like, there's something off about it. I don't like it, but I don't know what or why or how to tell it, how to fix it or whatever. You still had to have the taste and all of that. But I think what's cool is this is going to give, some interesting paths forward. And that was something that also applies to code as well. Because yesterday I was working on a new guide for the Rails Foundation. I'm building a custom callback to basically build a custom counter cache.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I'm trying to avoid too many teasers of exactly what I'm working on. But it was funny because like I asked Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, I asked 3 or 4 different AIs the same exact question, took the prompt, pasted it in each one of them. One, would give you an implementation right away. The others might give you like, here's a couple implementations. Here's what you probably should do. But then if you have like really high rights and need to do this for scale, maybe you want to do it a different way, and ended up with like 6 different solutions. And I was like, this is really interesting because like generally when I'm going to go tackle a problem, I just end up with one of the solutions, and it'd probably be the simplest one where I wouldn't realize some of the like performance issues or something until it got to production. Then it was too late and it was like, oh, this is slow. We have to roll it back or fix it really fast. But it kind of gives me now the ability to like, oh, I should evaluate like, how do I want to solve this? In the Rails guide, let's do it the simple, easy to comprehend way that isn't the most performant. But if we were Shopify, we should absolutely not do that.
Exactly. You don't want to oversolve. That's not the right word, but you don't want to
over-engineer it.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like a massive unlock to have AI to be able to like, instead of Googling it and then trying to read 17 Stack Overflow questions that are all slightly wrong and
the unanswered one from 4 years ago. And it prompted that XKCD cartoon, like, what did you see?
It's pretty awesome to have those tools at your fingertips. You still have to know the code and what you're looking for and all that at the end of the day. But like now you have a lot more options to choose and maybe get it right the first time more often than not.
People will tell you this. I would pretty much say you should rip out Bootstrap Tailwind material. It doesn't matter what it is. You should get rid of it. Because what I really loathed was the classitis that would show up in the HTML. Specifically on 2 factors. One, performance on load time. You're just loading so much more every single page load instead of loading a reference that points to a one-time loaded file. Not as big of an issue when you're on gigabit fiber. It made a big difference in 56K modems, but that's a long time ago. But then also editing that. Okay, now every one of these headlines that has this 7 different class names attached to it, I got to go find all of those. Again, with AI, this has become much less of an issue than it used to be. But I still feel that there's some good stuff now that really actually makes those systems better for AI, and that AI has, 1, a lot of documentation around them, and 2, clear guardrails as to what it can and can't do or how to implement certain UI, because it has thousands of examples. It's good, but then also is it something that is so unintelligible. And I think this goes across the board. It's not just on the view layer code, but does it become so unintelligible that I don't know what is there? I actually can't even edit it myself anymore. Maybe so, maybe not.
Yeah. There's many times where I use Tailwind a lot. And maybe part of this is the perfection of like the Tailwind UI components where they will like, well, your nav bar technically needs 2 versions, one for mobile that has like, it expands in a different way than on desktop and yada, yada. And it's like going back and trying to edit some of those when you haven't touched it in 4 years and realizing how much detail there is where it's like, well, this specifically needs to be display flex here only in mobile, but then not in desktop. And those become extremely hard to go back and like make modifications to. I feel like I've struggled with that a lot. AI can make those changes actually pretty fast because it kind of can comprehend all that at once pretty quickly, whereas you've got to pick through every single class and they may not be ordered very reliably and whatever else. Because you end up with like, the visual things like padding and margins and colors and font weights and underlines. Whereas there's this second structural CSS that is the display grids and flexes and position inset, absolute, sticky, fix, whatever. And like those are all required for this to lay out the same way you want it to, but yet it's blended in with all the like styling stuff that's like, okay, I wish I could just see one or the other of those at the same, just turn off the others sometimes and be able to like look at it. And sometimes I wish like that we used more custom HTML components, so that like we had more than like 8 nested divs, because like if
that's a hill I still will die on.
And a nav, because like when you look at the HTML and you have a side and a main and a nav and whatever else, like you can glance at it really quickly and understand exactly what you're looking at, and you can tell that like there's a sidebar. I don't really know if the sidebar is like going to be hidden away as a hamburger menu on mobile or not, but like in the HTML, I just know it exists, which is all I really need to see most of the time. But I would imagine that it's the majority of Rails developers' like biggest struggle is getting the front end in a good spot.
Yeah,
and maybe that's why inertia is taking off so much.
There's so much. Yeah, I actually pinged Bruce and Dave Thomas, just kind of saying, "Hey, should we revisit the book?" Because it is a decade and change, right? But it's also that like we kind of had that nadir through COVID, but coming out of that, like all of a sudden, you had Joel doing Flex, you had inertia kind of come up. People had already been playing with the, the React harness and stuff like that, where React Rails and stuff. So it was not a true separation. It's kind of like this merged in kind of vibe of React in Rails versus, I've got an API app and I've got a React app, right? And then you've got the view component, like, the good standby there. And that's one that I've really been starting to think more and more about is kind of the base, in the sense of now composability becomes something that an AI is actually really good at. And I can sit there and say, here's my 6 layouts or whatever I've got. And those are components. And then I've got a dialogue base. And then here are some kind of things that can get put into that are certain kinds of layouts for certain kinds of information. And all of a sudden, I've got this really rich composable interface that is documented in Lookbook for view component, right? Or if you're in React, you're doing the same kind of component mentality with Storybook.js. And all of a sudden, these things tie together. And instead of sitting there and saying, well, I saw your HTML and CSS, I'm going to just kind of mash something together and here's a new button. Aren't you happy? I made up a color name that you didn't have in your UI. Like, it has very specific guidelines now. It's really, and it's funny. I mean, we've been in a Slack channel, I was talking with some people about like the design.md has become this thing this week, and Google's pretending they invented it. And it's just like Claude MD. There's nothing fancy here, right? Just another file for the system to look for and learn from. But you can actually really start to, lock that stuff in really specifically. And I found one unlock on doing UI, at least with Claude. Claude would go through, a PRD and say, I'm all done. Go check it. I'm like, content missing. First click. I'm like, this is not done. And so my new thing was okay, one of my rules in Claude MD is you have to be able to click the entire UI all the way through the flow with Playwright. And that is an acceptance criteria. And all of a sudden, wow, so much better. And I also get to see it's clicking through and I'm like, oh, that looks ugly. I want to fix that. There's a series of those things I have it run. That there's a DHH skill, which is unrelated to him, but is a lot of the Ultimate Rails guidelines in a skill file, right? And so, but that always reviews the code. And then I've got bin CI running, which is, I had this before the Rails 8 kind of setup. So it's running the test suite. And usually for me, that's an RSpec suite. It's going through and it's running Brakeman. It's running checks on security for the JavaScript stuff, looking for CVEs, any of that kind of stuff. So every one of the commits, it's always doing that. And another one drives me crazy. Oh, these are test failures unrelated to our changes. Yeah, but we were green when we started. So
yeah.
What? So I've been like, the suite will run clean is kind of like, all caps, like in Claude MD, right? But those are the kind of things now,
well, this test was failing, so I deleted it. We're good.
It works for me. That's like the old classic, won't fix hashtag kind of thing. Just like not our problem.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Right. But I feel there's so much opportunity there with just like, learning how to train these things. And all of us are dabbling every day. We're learning new things that work and don't work. But I feel like view component to me seems to be like kind of the next level from partials. Like taking that and composing them now is going to give AI something a little more guardrailed and a little less easy to break. Flex feels like something that is still above my pay grade. I'm working through Brad's class on that right now. And I'm just like, yeah, man, this stuff is crazy complex. But it's amazing. I don't have a good mental model of it yet, of how it fits in, but hopefully I'll be able to kind of understand that. But yeah, this is like maybe we should revisit the book because it's a brave new world now, right?
You're effectively like writing an interface for the component and what arguments it takes and what options it has. And whatever way you slice it, that alone is important for the LLMs to be able to read and understand like, okay, this is required, that is optional, whatever. It gives it context that just throwing a partial at it with nothing, even the magic comment isn't enough half the time, and David wants to remove that anyways. I know he said that in a podcast or something. He's like, we should never merge that. And I really don't use that anywhere hardly. I know there was one place I saw it used recently because it was tripping up Herb when I was parsing it. But the other part of that is that so many times those components, it's not just a table or something. It needs JavaScript. That's the big win for any React or Vue components or Alpine or whatever. Like the HTML and the JavaScript are one in the same, and it is together, including the styles too, which like makes so much sense. And Rails has always kind of had that all split apart as very separate things. Yeah, there are very separate containers. CSS is its own thing. You might break it out into a CSS file and import it in your application file, but like it doesn't live together. There's no cohesiveness there. Now that CSS anchor positioning is like baseline everywhere, like usable in all the modern browsers, we like switched over to using that, and it's amazing because it's no JavaScript, and now you get a drop-down menu and you get tooltips and any kind of popovers. It's just like wonderful. No JavaScript. It feels so refreshing because it's like we eliminated that one piece that felt very disconnected. But when you've got all the component and it's all together, it's not that big of a deal. But I find, your stimulus controllers, if they don't dictate any of the HTML, then that can be a nice thing because maybe you want a button in some cases, but it's an anchor in other cases, but you want it to have the same functionality. And yet almost all the time I'm like, I don't want to mark up the HTML with these 17 data actions for mobile taps and clicks on the desktop.
Yeah, the attachment is still kind of nasty.
Yeah, and like the window click, I want to close this drop down if you click somewhere outside of it, and keyboard shortcuts too. And it's like, I want my stimulus controller to say, hey, this button element or target element, like go assign the actions to it for me. Don't even do that in the HTML. Just say, hey, this thing. But then at that point, you're like, well, shoot, might as well use like a Vue component, have it generate the HTML. Right. It knows how to wire it up. So then whenever I use it, I don't have to think about it. That's the biggest problem I have is like, if anytime I want to do a dropdown, I need a wrapper div, and then I need a button, and then I need a menu, and then I need to make sure that the data controller is on the top, but then the button has to have a data action. I have to have targets for the button and the menu inside of it. Yeah, it's just too much. And I guess you can kind of make a partial for a dropdown, but it's still, you're going to have variations and other things. And it's like, it just feels a little too disconnected most of the time, at least in my mind.
Well, that's where it's so exciting to see some of the changes. Like I just refactored on a .NET app. It's an older 4.7, like ancient .NET app, but basically just went through it for over the course of a month with Claude, finding all the JavaScript things that have been replaced by HTML5 elements with CSS.
Yeah.
I'm going through and I'm like, all right, and I'm like, I want to push this, see where I can go. I'm like, what is left? And it's like, you can take out jQuery now. I'm like, achievement unlocked. All right, let's go.
That's awesome.
And so it's kind of fun to see that these things that used to be so difficult to do, the patterns we wanted to do of interaction have now become first-class elements just built in right into the browser, and we don't have to go. Date picker is a great one, right? Date and time picker.
Yep.
Now that's just, boom, it's a thing. It's its own thing. You don't have to go wire that in and then have to style that crazy div structure that comes up. I don't know. I think the thing we're missing like the web monkey, for lack of a better word, from 1999, 2000 era, where it was like every week you were like, oh, what's this new thing that somebody figured out how to do. So I think people just kind of get in their habits, and that's fine. I mean, especially in larger teams, larger code bases, not everything's going to get refactored incessantly. That's probably not a good thing, actually. But you do end up with stuff where, we have this 6-year-old pattern because nobody realized there was a thing we could redo.
Yeah. Right now we're using floating UI for tooltips because I can't remember, didn't Tippy get archived or something? I thought it was like no longer maintained or something like that. I don't remember. But yeah, it's archived to November 2024. So I was like, crap, like we got to go look for something else. And like we tried to use the polyfill for anchor positioning because like ideally, anchor positioning will work. But like Safari's a little weird, we noticed. And even though like it claims to be fully supported, like it wasn't working right it would flicker on and off like the pop over or whatever. And so we like tried the polyfill, but polyfilling JavaScript is one thing. Polyfilling CSS is that's a whole different ballpark. And that did not work out. Just like it's one of those things where like I love the backend side of things because I can upgrade to Ruby 4 and Rails main or whatever and use the bleeding edge because it does not touch customers. It does not matter at that point. But when we have to depend on the client browser and locking it down to, the very latest Firefox version, there's a whole lot of people that have not upgraded Firefox for a few, months or whatever. So you can't just trust that kind of stuff. jQuery 4.0 came out in January. You could have just upgraded the app to
I didn't even realize
4.0.
I kind of thought that was a dead end. I didn't even, not a space I play in much because normally if it's JavaScript, it's going to be a stimulus controller, right? And so I was just
jQuery controller.
Rip it out, all of it gone. The separation that you brought up there is an interesting thing, right? Where I don't have to worry about the concerns that this is going to blow up. And there is that difference between I'm supporting the last 5 versions of whatever browsers or whatever that new switch they put in that broke everybody's app because they didn't pay attention that it went in.
The allow modern browser version.
People are like, hey, why are you blocking me? I'm like, I don't know. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that was that. I was thinking that was cutting off IE. And then I like look up the method. I'm like, oh, that's really restrictive. Okay, maybe I'll be a little more generous in what I'm allowing here. But yeah, but when you're starting to say, well, I do want to support all this cutting edge stuff because it unlocks so much benefit from the developer experience side.
Right.
Okay, you got to start trading off. I mean, it's still also kind of the world in a weird way of IE to go back into the history, right? Where it's like, I'm still using Internet Explorer 6. And you're like, the what? What?
Yeah.
Because I remember when we did, like a decade ago, we were doing an intelligence product and it had to deploy on SIPRnet, which is the super, slow but super secure federal government network. And I think they only supported IE6 or something crazy like that. And it was like, gonna have a custom style sheet, got to handle it, right?
Oh, geez. Yeah.
No, I mean, now that's all gone, but it's still the same thing of like, well, I'm running Chrome. It's harder now because I'm running Chrome. Okay, I need you to go under your menu and tell me which Chrome, because then you got to go try and download that Chrome and see if you can replicate the error. And then the worst thing where it's like, okay, I don't know what's happening on your computer, dude. Maybe shift refresh. There's so much of that now where it's like the debugging has gotten more difficult.
Yeah, even the like browser extensions can mess with much that those can cause issues and
load it in the incognito window. I'm glad I'm not frontline tech support because I would just get one of those like push button things that has different pre-recorded statements, and I would just be hitting the different buttons because it would be oh,
yeah,
check that.
Thing that sounds like an answer but definitely didn't answer your question and close the ticket.
Have you tried turning it off and back on again?
Yeah. Thanks for contacting support. If we can help you with anything else.
And you're like, no, wait.
Yeah, the browser thing, I think we turned it on Go Rails, and then of course there was a bunch of people, and so we turned it off, and I think it's been enough time that we've turned it back on and it's fine. I don't want people to have a weird experience when we're using, import maps and all the modern stuff now. So and CSS like the has selector and whatever, that stuff is actually critical. Otherwise, things are maybe not going to work at all or whatever.
Right.
So it is more important that we actually let the user know in this case that you're on a really old browser, you know? If you can't upgrade it, just install a different one, you know? Like,
there's not too many places where it's like you need to upgrade unless you're running like a decade old machine. Like I know I've got my old G4 here and it can't go past, you know, whatever crazy browser it doesn't, because it doesn't support SSL built in because of the SSL version, right? Okay, so that's an issue. But
yeah,
how many people are running a 1999, you know, desktop machine still, right, as their daily driver? I mean, maybe
that's how you're so productive. Still running the 24-year-old operating system.
Exactly. 10.4 for the win.
I just know it so well.
It does. Yeah. It's one of those things like you install OS 9 and you start browsing OS 9 just for like a nostalgia kicker to open up some ancient file. And you're like, man, this is pretty snappy. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
Cool.
What was I was watching something on YouTube and, you know, he was talking about the more RAM and power, like the ridiculousness of a M5 chip these days. And yet everything's still pretty much the same performance as it's always been. It's because, like, guess what? Now you don't care about using a ton of RAM. You used to have to load things into memory. And I remember my first project was like reverse engineering the apt package manager on Linux. And in Python, I downloaded all of the like files. Here's every package that's available and here's all the versions and their dependencies. And in Python, I was like, cool, I'll just load them into a giant hash or something. And then I like ran out of memory all of a sudden because I think I loaded or I made them objects and that just took up a whole bunch of space. And then I ended up optimizing it into like just plain hashes and it was much simpler, you know, not objects and allocating things for each one of those. Saved a ton of memory, but it was like, yeah, okay, this is a big constraint that I have to work with, I guess. And, you know, it was Python. I was just learning and I wasn't doing anything efficient. But like after some time, I just don't have to care because now our computer has 8 gigs of RAM, 16, whatever. It doesn't matter. And things like YJIT is now possible. Like we're going to trade off RAM for performance. Yeah. That's fine. That's a good thing. That's
great.
You know, but if you're on a really restricted memory on an embedded device or something, you're not going to probably use that. You're going to have to optimize differently. But like, we don't even have to care most of the time because things have changed so much. But that's also why, because we don't care, things are not as performant as they could be or should be. But we're not riding Roller Coaster Tycoon in assembly.
Well, that's the, I was thinking, I had my Mac SE here from when I was a kid. It turns on, that's about it. But I mean, it originally had like 1 meg of RAM and a 20 meg hard drive, right? Mm-hmm. And we upgraded it to 4 megs of RAM and we were living large.
Yeah,
This is when Microsoft Word fit on a floppy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of like, wait, what? The entirety of Microsoft Word was under 1.4 megabytes. Yes, it was. And now it's like, you know, oh yeah, we moved the decimal point to the right a couple points. It's like 700 megabytes to download Word. And you're like, what is in here? I'm all for libraries, but man, you got some kitchen sink stuff happening here. It gotta be.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. I've got the old like Windows 3.1 Canon laptop that I learned to code on, and Windows 3.1, I think was on it, but it's got like 2 or 4 megs of RAM and somebody upgraded to like Windows 95 and it's quite a bit slower. And I got to go back but the Windows like 3.1 floppy disks are like, there's like 4. That's all for the entire operating system. Right? Yeah. It was like, it's under 10 megs or something ridiculous.
Well, it's mind-boggling too to think that now you can't even fit some of these programs on a CD, right? And how big that was back in the day, right? Like,
and the interesting thing was the CDs were really interesting because it felt like it blew through those pretty fast. And then like all of a sudden you needed a DVD and then you needed like a double density like DVD and stuff. Like, holy crap, people are ripping Blu-rays and they're 40 gigs. It's like insane.
I need an external RAID all of a sudden.
Yeah. And it was just like the density of storage just kind of went crazy for a period of time. And it's like, whoa, my flash drive was like 8 megabytes the first one I had.
Well, I just saw this picture of a bunch of IBM techs rolling a 5 megabyte hard drive onto a truck.
I've seen that.
And the thing is literally, it's like 10 feet by 10 feet by 8 feet or something. And it's like all these guys pushing it up a ramp into this like moving truck and it's like 5 megabytes. And you're just like, huh.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of one of those things where people, sometimes people are always like, yeah, can I run this on whatever, esoteric, weird system set up? And it's like, sometimes I'm just waiting for somebody to call, be like, so I work at Bletchley Park and I have this tube computer I'd like to try to run your software on. It's got like 2K of memory, maybe, But sometimes I feel like that's where, it's like, it's time to upgrade, guys. Really, it's time to upgrade. The power draw alone, they must think you're mining Bitcoin and you got a heater. That's all you got.
What else? I'm trying to think. We had some things we were going to talk about, but I'm drawing a blank now.
Yeah, a lot of the view stuff is, all the AI stuff is just everyone's freaking out and or going crazy in a good way. I think there's a lot of fear, but there's a lot of opportunity broadly.
Oh, yeah.
I've been going back and forth a lot lately between oh, this is really cool. There's some utility here. And the last couple of days been swinging really hard on the doom and gloom side of things. It's just what in the world is happening? How am I going to continue to make a living?
Yeah, right. I don't have an answer. I think it's one of those things that's fascinating is that, well, Alex Karp, I think, said something about this, the guy from Palantir, love or hate Palantir. He's got some interesting takes, especially on neurodivergency and kind of the new mentalities required for being able to work. Things that are very siloed and documented well are going to be more and more handled by large language models. The things they don't do well are the interconnectivity, the squirrel. That squirrel matters over here. I'm going to tie these squirrels together by their tails and watch what happens. That kind of weird things where people are always like, oh, okay, you're off on some rabbit chase. And you're like, if it's important, give me a week and I'll have why it's important. That I think is going to actually become this weird, helpful power thing, to be able to pull that in and say, boom, boom, boom. Oh, these things come together and the AI can work in each one of them. Okay. But it doesn't know how to put them together or how to see that connectivity. I think that's going to be an interesting challenge and experience. We'll see. 2 years ago, this stuff was generating junk and bad poetry. So, in 2 years, that might, people will be listening to me, like, what the heck is that dude talking about? He's totally wrong. I think things will change, right? You look at the previous industrial revolution, I think you had 80 or 90% of America were farmers. That's definitely not the case anymore. And so things will change. And the benefit of I can make a piece of software where there was no value to make it before, but it does make things easier and improves my life. There's an unlock there that I think we're going to start to see a change. And it's going to be that subject matter expertise and patience and iteration are going to really start to drive. So you're going to see somebody show up at a hackathon who's never coded before, but plays with Claude Code or whatever tool. And they're a subject matter expert and they live this pain and they're going to solve this pain because they know the ins and outs of every minutia about all that misery, like logistics or this weird thing where it would cost $300,000 to $400,000 just to write, the first pass of that software. Well, this person can sit there and patiently hack through it in the evenings. And yeah, it's not going to be perfect. No, maybe it's not deployable. Maybe it's got a security hole so big you could drive a semi-truck through it, but it might do something. It might be an excellent prototype. And so there's going to be a lot more of us being able to say, I'm going to take your 80% solution to deployment as opposed to I'm starting from zero. And I think you're going to see a lot of things like that start to change. Who knows? This is every day I'm trying. It's, something you wake up and you get smacked in the face with, here's a brand new tool you have to learn.
It feels a bit like all of a sudden power tools are invented and you have,
hammer,
a drill
right?
and you're not using a hammer and a handsaw. And what's interesting is the ability to do a crap load more stuff is there. But that doesn't mean that people are going to make good stuff either. You can still use power tools really ineffectively and whatever. So you still have to be able to do things with those tools. So yeah.
Well, the vision of what's going to be built. It's you've got a pneumatic nailer and you've got all these fun things and it's very expensive too, right? You compared to the hammer and the saw and the hand drill. Now you've got to spend, 10x to buy this tool set. But do you know the house you're building? Let's be small.
Right.
Do you know the piece of furniture you're going to build or the chicken coop you're going to build or whatever?
Yeah. Did you know you don't put just your wood right directly on the dirt? You need a foundation. Right. You need to know about all these little details before you get into actually doing quality work, at least, And I think it's going to end up more like that where who knows? We may not need near as many developers or whatever, but like it's going to go the same way as kind of the trades. They're still incredibly, incredibly useful, important, necessary. People get paid very well as electricians and plumbers and whatever else. If you're able to do these things well with the tools you're given now, great. In the meantime, while this is the very first version of Power Tools that we've seen compared to like going from just Ruby to having Rails, that was a great layer of abstraction. But now we have like, we went from hand tools to corded tools to battery powered tools now or whatever. And it's like, wow, we have a lot more flexibility all of a sudden. It's kind of that, I feel like right now, where we're like, wait, what do we even do? How does this stuff even work? What do you mean I'm not going to trip on the cord anymore?
Yeah. I don't know if you've read it, but Chad Fowler's, like when he was at Rails Conf in Philly, he ran a panel, I don't know if you remember, and it was just like sad and depressed, and he was bumming hard. And then like within the next 2 months, he kind of realized and went through some kind of unveiling of mental breakthrough. And he's been writing about this Phoenix architecture kind of mentality now, where code becomes more disposable. And that's okay. You can just regenerate everything and start over. And it's actually an unlock. And one thing he said that was fascinating to me was this, we spent a lot of time talking about memory management, right? Like it used to be like that was a lot of what I had to do in code was just how do I manage the memory to make sure I don't blow this up? Then, you get a layer of abstraction higher and okay, now I'm not dealing with that. I'm working more on this kind of like product layer. And now we're really getting up to that kind of pure product where I don't even know how it's being built underneath. And so it is a much bigger jump, but it is kind of this like progression from like, I'm literally punching the bits in a card to, you can kind of see the steps that we've taken towards it.
I don't know how many times I've sat down to work on an idea and just gotten stuck in the first 24 hours where you're like, this is so painful, even with Rails, to go and build like the prototype for something. And it's like, I can spend a month building a prototype to find out, this isn't actually that useful. Like that was a month wasted. But if I can throw Claude at building a prototype and then have that in an hour and then play with it and realize, this isn't going anywhere. Hell yeah, that's amazing. And like when the code does matter is when you find the thing that does work. You want the code base that you're going to maintain for the next 20 years. You want to pay much more close attention to that. Yes, you could totally throw out some internal architecture things, but also you now have a billion rows in your database that's kind of set in stone and a lot harder to change. And so, at the beginning, it's perfect to prototype, do whatever the hell you want, figure it out, because now the barrier to entry is so much lower, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Makes opportunity harder. You can't just become a plumber or electrician tomorrow. You have to go through and learn how to do it right, follow code and whatever else, and like get certified, insurance, whatever. Now we're going to end up kind of maybe in that same position where like you can be the hobbyist plumber and electrician, go for it. But the barrier to entry to make a living may be a little tougher. But luckily we've been through this. We're not starting out just today where we've seen the good and the bad and the ugly of how things were done. Now we're probably the best position to take advantage of LLMs to write code for us because we can actually tell if there's a glaring security hole here. Why don't we fix that? So I think in a way it's beneficial to us. The people who could take advantage of power tools the best were the ones who are really good with hand tools, That's my
merger. Hope. Like it used to be the three very, very, very separate circles of product development, design, and those are really meshing together now, right? So you're going to have much more overlap, and that's good in the sense of people starting to understand the complexity of other people's roles and knowing where the lines are. And like, I can't actually do this really complex thing. I need to bring my friend in here. But now instead of me saying, well, here's this mock-up of a single screen, I'm like, hey, here's a clickable prototype that's in the language we're using, and it probably is not usable for production, but it's real. And I've had to think about the states because they're exposed now to me, and I can't get away with being like, nope, that doesn't matter. It's not in the mock-up because I'm like, oh, that's annoying. I have to fix that. Again, it's a lot of change and that's uncomfortable, but it is here. And so you putting your head in the sand like an ostrich, right? That's just not going to help anyone. But everyone's approach to the market, approach to their current roles, I mean, that's all has to be kind of like, well, that's going to change. And that's super uncomfortable and stressful, right? I mean, it's just like, I am not able to roll into a place and say, we're going to do a whole design project for 18 months because the engineer's like, yeah, I just threw Tailwind UI at this and we mocked it up real quick. Oh, okay, cool. So how can I now help this kind of org and this kind of team? Okay, well, here, let's start talking about how we can make the AI generate consistent UI. Let's talk about our flows. Are we working on our flows? How can I teach you all to think about your flows? So I mean, that's just me looking at my career and my path forward. And I mean, everyone's kind of got different things. And where are your strong suits? Where are your connections that you can see across the aisle and say, I'm going to pull that in here, or I can speak product. So I can now dabble over on this area where I couldn't before because stay in your lane, right? I think there's a lot of that kind of opportunity hitting now.
Yeah, because you're, as a designer or even a developer, like this is the new layer of abstraction. We no longer need to worry about the code as much, which means we don't need to worry about the implementation of the design or the feature. We need to think about the flow, the customers, the use case, like all of the higher level product management type stuff is now the job almost. And like you still need to do all the underlying things to make that work, but it's shifting your focus up higher to, you know what? The thing you wish you could have worked on, which was the flow of onboarding and all that before, but it was so manual because you had to write your own authentication system or God forbid you're in JavaScript and you've got to have Clerk handle authentication and Supabase handle your database and implement all these APIs and whatever. Like now you don't need any of that. You can just think about, okay, the onboarding flow should work like this. Actually, we need to collect like their company email address. So like, can we filter out any Gmails or Yahoo mails or whatever? And it's like, okay, sure. We'll do a validation for you. And all of a sudden you're like thinking about the product now at a higher level. And so I feel like our jobs are going to still be just as critical, but the people who are just more purely technical and not thinking about writing code as a business problem and solving it for real customers and users, they're going to struggle more maybe in the long term. That'll still be necessary, especially at big companies like Google or whatever. But like small business is going to be all about how do we get you onboarded and actually to the point of like success as fast as possible. And that's really all you're going to care about. And you're just going to do that, which we've seen with all these different vibe coded apps that take off so fast. It's like you hear about a whole bunch of these and they may not be making a ton of money, but they can build something in a week and then it's in 10,000 people's hands being used.
You can roll on a pretty small ARR and support that because you didn't spend $400K to roll it out, right?
Well, you might have on tokens, but
that's true. Like, if you haven't used it, so one of the things I always use in Rails apps is Claude Swarm, which is something Obi put out, and it basically was agent swarms before they had made that built into the tool. But one of the fun things that it does is at the end of the session, it tells you your token costs if you just based on API costs. And there's days where I'm like, I am so glad I have a subscription because like, you just blew $1,500 in tokens. And I'm like, no, I didn't. Thank God.
Oh, thank goodness. I am real curious to see what happens with all the costs in the long term. Cause obviously they're like very heavily subsidized right now. And yet you're seeing the costs start to go up and whatever. And it's like weird things too of OpenAI supposedly buying out like 3 years of production of RAM.
The thing is, the power is becoming the issue now. They don't have enough power to run these places. So they're building power facilities or they're co-locating. CoreWeave does some fascinating stuff. They're co-locating in West Texas because there's a whole bunch of power that can't get out of there because there's not enough transmission. So all this solar and wind in West Texas, they're actually going to just build right next to it because it's right there. And then they'll do some battery work with it. So it's like, I think a lot of this stuff is going to be solved and inference is a fixed flat line cost. I think that's going to drop. And I think you're going to start to see inference, with a lot, like they keep coming up with new ways to do it. And I think it's not a frontier model locally, right? It's still kind of,
right.
But for some of the stuff in Claude or in Claudebot or whatever it's called these days, I just have it named itself. So mine's Argus, but whatever it's doing, like on a lot of the local checks, it doesn't need to go out. And sometimes it's like faster to go out to Haiku. But a lot of this stuff, it can just fire locally on Llama 3, 3.4, or doing it on the new Gemma. And I mean, I'm running on an old Mac Studio here, but I maxed it out in 2022. So I can run the MLX version of that model, and it's got 128 gigs of RAM. So it can do a lot of that stuff locally. I'm never going to see token numbers like farm of A100s or something somewhere.
Right.
It is interesting to see the possibilities. And I think that's going to continue. And for all the stupidity on X and other places where it's like, you're getting left behind. No, you're not. 5% of people in the US, like tech space, are probably rolling the way like some of us are rolling on these things. And whenever somebody's telling you you have to act quickly, they're trying to sell you something, right? They want your money and they want your fear to spend that money. So that's always one of those things you're just like, okay, no, like let's like, and I often will actually feed that into Claude Desktop or something and be like, break this down for me and tell me what's real here. And it always is like, rip, nope. That's a hype machine. There's nothing here. Mila Jovovich put out something, but it was
yes.
like, unfortunately, it's like with this guy, there's a crypto guy, and like there was a lot more hype than reality. It sounds like, unfortunately.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It might have been a bit of a scheme. What was it, Cameo, where you could pay celebrities to do stuff?
that was a fun business model.
Yeah, now you can pay them to write a couple GitHub commits for you.
Tom Cruise? Really? Tom Cruise?
Yeah. Yeah. He was filming, the next Mission Impossible, but he had a few hours to vibe code this thing with me. It's one of those cool things where all of compute tends to be centralized in the beginning. And then over time, like your phone can do all kinds of LLM stuff, or as they like to call it, machine learning and at Apple. But like, and same thing with the Mac Studios. You have very high memory bandwidth. You have the M3 Ultra, like I've got. It's crazy the amount of RAM and compute you have on this $3,000, $4,000 machine. It's crazy. Yeah. And that eventually just continues coming down to your freaking Raspberry Pis and whatever else, but like at the beginning, it's always
your Apple TV is a frontier model all of a sudden.
And yeah, it's like always at the beginning, it's centralized, it's crazy, specialized or whatever. And eventually it trickles down. And we're just at the very beginning of that because it's a new paradigm of computing and stuff, but it's like so new that it's expensive and it's, hard to do at scale. And it's cool though. The hard part is the like blend of that with the timing of the economy and post-COVID and everything where money is not flowing as much as it used to. Companies were hiring just for the sake of making sure that Meta didn't get this employee and whatever else. And now they're really like having to step it back and they're blaming AI for all this. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, people are probably more productive, but you're not seeing anything massive changing. The only massive changes you see are the $0 to $30 billion ARR that like Anthropic has. And it's mostly just the AI companies that are having these rocket ship growth things.
Wasn't there something saying pretty much all the spend or all the GDP increase was from the AI buildouts? Something crazy like that?
Probably. It's interesting because it's like, that doesn't mean it's going to apply to every little small business or anything. No. Like we're seeing that, like we're struggling because, Google's like, hey, all that content that everybody's created, that's ours now. We don't need to send anyone your way anymore. Yeah, thanks for your service. Things, And that's pretty rough on everybody and not just us, but like now is an interesting time because you have to care about like, what is your actual moat? Like what can you do that nobody else can do? You can be any other plumber in your local town, but who's the plumber that's the most successful? The plumber who also happens to employ an electrician and an HVAC person and whatever. And they can take care of you all at once or
they're working on the crazy systems like the in-floor heating thing where it's not just I'm going to fix your toilet. It's like, no,
they're the experts.
I can do that. But they're like, way in.
They're like, look, we can do a heated driveway and we can do all the plumbing for that. And you're like, well, probably the average plumber doesn't know how to build a manifold and lay the pipe in concrete and work with the concrete team and yada, yada. Or like the pool specialists who are like, well, we don't just crane in a fiberglass pool. We actually do all the rebar and spray in the gunite and whatever. Like you have to now have some specialization that matters, and it used to be just simply you could make content that other people weren't doing. And that was good enough. And that's kind of like how GoRails was in Railscast. Like nobody else hardly is making content on this stuff. So great. You can make a business out of it. Until now.
This is a weird thing. I would say that people just aren't learning the way they used to, right? Because now I just type it into the model and the model needs to figure it out. But I'm not going and doing a deep dive on how to unwrap multiple databases in Rails. I'm going to say, hey, Claude, can we do multiple databases in Rails here? And what does that mean from a DevOps perspective? And
that's it. And then it does it and you're done. It makes the changes for you to the YAML files. And then you're done and you're like, cool. When we run into an issue, I'll just ask it to fix it and change the thing. And I don't have to worry about actually the nuances that Eileen does. It's an interesting time where like you have to reevaluate your skills and what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
That we've gotten comfortable with not having to in the last 10 years or whatever. But in a good way, it's scary, but it's a good fire under your butt to figure out like, what do you want to specialize in? What do you want to really get good at? What do you love doing? Because now all the tedious crap is you can
handled.
throw off. Yeah.
But even then, I think, people are kind of predicting this, no one will ever write code again for money thing. And I don't think that's true. I think most businesses, especially the when you start talking about the B2B 100 million plus, which is a huge, huge TAM, they don't want to sit there and try and code their own thing. That's not on their radar.
Yeah.
They want to hire someone who can do it so that you can deliver something twice as good in half the time. Great. There's value there.
Yeah.
Don't price by the hour anymore. Price by the value they're going to get out of it, right? That's the other mental unlock that we all have to kind of go through.
It's interesting because like to the business, they never cared about who or what writes the code. They knew it had to be people for a period of time, but like, did they care if it was you or an AI ever? Not really. They got customers they're trying to solve. Their salespeople are selling features we don't have yet, so we got to go build it. And I don't care who does it. So if you can build that feature
in a week instead of in 3 months, they're like, this is amazing, more.
Yeah. And if you can build that feature and it actually works and doesn't piss them off, so they renew, then great. Like, that's what we need. And you want that to be you or whatever, but hell, the sales guy can build that feature sometimes now if he needs to. He could vibe code that and you can have Toby making PRs to whatever. And he's CEO of a ridiculously large company. It's awesome.
He was early adopter on all this stuff, right? So it's been kind of fun to watch him be like, check it out.
It's super cool. And he's always been so extremely technical. It's awesome to see. But yeah, it's one of those things that like I'm not doing near as much as I could be with LLMs. And I have very little fear of missing out because you know what? MCPs aren't cool anymore. They were cool for a couple weeks. And then all of a sudden,
you had to build an MCP. What was that like?
Yeah, it's funny. I'll see, I don't know, Resend or somebody recently just announced we've got a new MCP server. And it's like, you're a little too late on that one. Like,
there is value in the functionality, right? And whatever it's called or whatever new form it takes. Like I do use the AppSignal MCP almost daily. I do use Ahrefs MCP almost daily. I don't care that it's an MCP. I care that I have a connection where I can tell Claude, go pull my recent exceptions and let's run some fixes and get bugs out.
Yeah, it's like an excuse to make those API endpoints you were too lazy to make before. Totally. Yeah. It's driving a lot of cool change like that because now what used to be something that a good example is Stripe. Stripe their dashboard has MRR graphs and all these other little things that they don't expose over the API. Right. They're going to be forced into doing that. Otherwise, competitors going to come out. They're going to have merchant of record. They're going to have your own embeddable graphs, whatever else. And they're just going to like make it easier for people to build. And then Stripe, if they don't build that, they're going to get left behind and that'll be that. And now it's going to come down to building all the tools for people to integrate. I feel bad for Zapier these days because it's like everybody's becoming capable of integrating directly with each other. Whereas it used to be, it's too hard, too much work, whatever, to integrate these two systems together. Not anymore, and the LLMs are capable enough to just go sign up for a Hey account and use my preferred name and email and password and whatever. Like it's cool. And the idea of like Ben Orenstein, have you seen, I forget the name of it, but he was working on like, the idea that I want to have services that humans are not allowed to register for. So only bots, and having like a reverse CAPTCHA where it's like, prove that you're not human. We really don't want a human here.
Solve this physics problem for me.
So it's cool to see all this stuff changing, but at the same time, the real base business value that you provide as a developer is basically unchanged. Not at all, really. But we maybe thought we were, because I'm really good at back-end code, that was my value. Your value is solving problems this whole time.
That's the biggest thing for most designers have this issue too. Why don't I get a seat at the table? Because you don't speak business. You talk about how the UI looks crappy. Nobody cares. You tell them that the UI is causing retention issues because it looks crappy. That's secondary to the business owner, but your UI has retention issues. Oh, snap. How do we do that? Because that's revenue. Yeah. Again, all that merging, like the people that are going to make it through this successfully are the ones that are going to be able to dabble and draw those things in, speak business, speak tech, speak developer, speak product, and understand, like pull all that stuff in. This is not stuff that is like, you had to be born with it. Like all of us learning these languages, right? And so this is, to me, I just think of it as it's just product management is just another language, and using that language, I'm able to accomplish things. Same way C or Ruby or Smalltalk or PHP is another language. And with that language, I'm able to accomplish things, right? But people are like, I can't do product management. That's hard. You're debugging C code. It's not hard. Product management's easy. You got to train your brain to think differently. And you know what's fun? You can actually have Claude set up a learning plan for you. All of this is just like, how can I use this? And like sitting there and spitballing stuff. And a lot of stuff's going to be like, no, that failed miserably. But that's the fun of what we do, right? Experiment, iterate. I see a lot of opportunity. And I think it's just one of those things where going back to that, like my first computer, I'm learning for the first time mentality, and being able to try and get back into that zone, that beginner's mind, I think is going to unlock for a lot of people some of the magic again. And we'll have a conversation in 10 years and our job titles will be radically different.
Yeah. One thing that'll be cool is like thinking about my kids growing up and getting into a career. Like I used to be excited for them to get into programming, but honestly, it'll be like, hey, you're going to have some code to run this, but they'll be better off not knowing any code in a lot of ways, because it's like, that'll bog you down. You'll be too worried about like the HTTP cache headers and whatever else. Like just go focus on, why do people not want to stop at my lemonade stand here on the street corner? You know what? If you were able to walk up to their car, instead of them having to find a place to park and get out and then get you change or whatever, you got your Square reader and you walk up to their car, do a drive-through. Having them learn those like, these are the business things that I need to think about, the like customer experience of it. If you can get them to think about those things, then making a lemonade stand is always the like great suggestion for kids to learn business. But it's like, okay, how do you actually take that the distance and like, look, let's go through Chick-fil-A's drive-through and then go through freaking, I don't know, McDonald's or Taco Bell or something.
What do you want?
And you go through Taco Bell and like, we got to check our order 3 times because they're going to forget something. Right. But if you go through Chick-fil-A, they've already figured it out. They walk up to your car with the little, menu and the checkout. You're in and out, and it's so fast and whatever. And like
we're never worried about a big line at Chick-fil-A because it's cranking.
It's so fast. Yeah. It's that kind of stuff that we probably all take for granted because we're too far in the weeds as developers and designers right now, because that was the hard part. In order to be good today, you have to care about all the details and the weeds, and you will still in the future, but hopefully there will be a lot less of those around for you to worry about. So that's kind of how I see it, is I think we're going to end up with a lot of those things, or you're really valuable because this thing cannot get out of the weeds. You're going to be stuck in the weeds. Like working on Hatchbox is a good example of that. It's like the weeds of Linux
DevOps
are not going away anytime soon. So it's always going to be hard. Resend and email is always going to be hard. You see that too with like AppSignal and observability tools. It's like gathering data, graphing the data, pulling things out of data that are practical, useful tidbits. That's hard. So those are always going to be valuable. So you now have to just think about like, what's a hard problem to solve that's worth solving that nobody else is doing?
like what you were talking about with the business aspect of the lemonade thing's a great example of this, but think bigger too. Like we would call this service design, right? So you look holistically at a customer experience and it's all the touch points from the marketing all the way through. And all of those have engineering aspects to them. They all have software aspects to them in many ways, but it's not necessarily the SaaS or whatever, right? It's the marketing side, or it's this ad campaign, or how do you start turning those things into faster realizations for the team? How do you there's so many unlocks that because things were just not worth the squeeze before were difficult to do or costly to do. And now, I can vibe code something to rip in all my Google Analytics and UTM codes. And I can tell you every day without having to spend 2 hours looking at it, which campaigns are performing better. We can faster tune those campaigns. So this is the kind of stuff where I think people start thinking outside the box of, I write controller code. No, you use software to solve business problems, right? That's everyone's level up that we have to kind of make a step through.
Yeah, it reminded me of Jobs to Be Done, that framework, and the story of Christensen went into McDonald's and was there in the morning and was trying to optimize their breakfast or something. And he's there's a weirdly large amount of people buying milkshakes in the morning on their way to work. And he started realizing you don't want a donut because it makes your hands sticky while you're driving. You don't want a banana because now you got this peel and you don't know what to do with it. A sandwich may be too messy or hard to hold, whatever. And he realized that's why people were buying milkshakes. It was they got a decent commute. They want something convenient to hold and to sip on that takes a while, because you could get a sandwich and eat it all in 4 bites. And then now I sit in traffic for 45 minutes. This is boring. So they want something that takes a while to consume that they can just enjoy. Maybe they don't get lunch. And so they want something higher calorie in the morning, whatever. He realized there was a whole bunch of reasons that people were buying milkshakes in the morning. For that reason, he then was we should just make a breakfast milkshake, a frappe. And that became a giant part of their business and stuff. Yeah. And it was there's no way to just come up with that idea randomly. You had to watch your customers, see the weird things that are going on, and then talk to them and figure out what are you doing? What the hell are you having a large milkshake at 7 in the morning?
It's hilarious because that's the kind of stuff. I think that the UX world is having a hard time with this, but UX is going to become a skill that lots of people have, as opposed to a job title per se. And there will be still experts that are, and I think you're going to have more of the experts in the human psychology, deep dive, really user research formalities and setting those things up are still difficult. But if you go back and watch some of my old talks, I'm literally go talk to your customer or your end user, or walk over to somebody in a Starbucks, say, hey, can you try this app out? I'll buy you a drink if you can just try this app out and tell me what you think. Get real feedback. Everyone's I can't talk to people. But it's if we can break some of those walls down, that's the kind of stuff that we're all going to be doing a lot more of. Is just everything's just blending together and it's going to be this weird mix of things.
Yeah, it really will be. So we should wrap up. But one thing I posted in the notes here for us, you were talking about fun UI things. There's this new thing called HTML and Canvas. So you can use the browser's canvas to do crazy things. And what I just liked was my favorite use case of it. It's the screen has ice over it, and you have to move your mouse to clear out the ice and the frost in order to see the sign up menu.
It's trying to drive in the morning when the windshield keeps fogging up. You're no, stop.
The funny thing was it could be used for spam prevention. So
right.
Even real humans, it's not very convenient for, but it's pretty cool. And then a couple of the other ones were Duck Hunt that Wes Boss had done. So you can just shoot the screen, and here's the link to that one. So you your cursor.
Does the dog still laugh at you?
I didn't listen to or watch the video with sound on, so maybe it does.
Oh my gosh, Duck Hunt!
It's cool. It's pretty cool. So that's the cool stuff. You can allow browser version to all the latest ones that support that.
This is the kind of stuff that people would do weird fun things like this back in the day with Flash, right? And it was just you're how did they come up with this? But these are the things that are exciting, where this whole new technology subset opens up and people just make weird things. And it's this like weird undercurrent. And then somebody figures out, oh, this would be really useful to actually in this business case. And all of a sudden, then everyone starts implementing that business case. But the path to get there is so much fun.
Yeah. And it needs to be that way because, if you're always doing the practical things and not for fun, then you don't discover a lot of things that you would have missed otherwise.
Right.
So it's important to have that play in there because, even Basecamp, if they were just working on Basecamp and didn't play with what if we, try and take out Slack for fun? Let's build the once products and let's see if we can compete with Gmail. At the beginning, it had to have been like that'd be hilarious if we could, as a 40-person company, take down Gmail that owns like 80% of the.
David did an interview with Greg last week.
Yeah.
And he talks about this and he's like, if Apple hadn't kind of stepped in it and given them basically a $2 million launch campaign, I think is how he referred to it. And I was like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I don't know. We might not have had a good launch, but thanks for the free press.
I know. That was so funny, the timing of that right before WWDC that year. And then them getting such negative PR. It's like, well, we're going to have to do something before the developer conference of the year. That worked out so well. Couldn't have probably ever been planned and done purposely, but like, yeah, so good. I haven't gotten through that whole interview yet, but it was a really good one because there's a bunch of things in there that he talks about that were similar to what we're talking about too.
Yeah.
I'll have to have a link to that. But yeah, good hanging out. I know we could have gone for a couple extra hours, so we'll have to
come see us at Rails World in Austin for that conference.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. September is going to be here fast. I can't believe it's already April.
Well, that's what you were talking earlier about, the kids. Like, hey, I got 18 years. And all of a sudden, like my oldest is 13. All of a sudden, I was like, he was 3, like yesterday, wasn't he? No.
Oh, it's crazy. Good catching up. And we'll talk again soon. For anybody who wonders why David's been quiet, he had to drop off for another meeting like over half an hour ago.
Sorry, David.
But yeah, good chat, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.